Sorry, let me just, is it that one? Yep, that's it. Okay, hi. So I really have drawn the short straw coming after Jeremy and someone from Copenhagen. I mean, good grief. I'm from Birmingham, so, and I love my city, but boy, we have got some issues. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what I think designing democratic cities looks like. So yesterday, spending the time here in Cork has been absolutely glorious. What a city, and so much potential. I just had the best day, that's why I didn't go and do much in the afternoon apart from explore. And the opportunity was incredible. I also happened to stop a few people on the street just to understand what the average person has to say about Cork, which was really, really interesting, which meant last night I got home and changed my entire presentation. Because what I realized was that you guys are so close and on the precipice of doing some really, really spectacular things. And actually, in order to leapfrog some of the mistakes of many of the cities that I've worked in and the one I live in, I felt like I needed to go to some really practical examples. So there's only 2 slides from my original presentation, and I'll tell you about them because I think there's a whole really interesting theoretical piece of work to think about there. But actually I realized that what you needed probably was more practical examples. Just trying to change the... Okay, cool. So this quote here from one of my colleagues, Alistair, is probably the single most profound quote that has helped to shape the work that I've been part of for the last 10 years. So thinking about democracy beyond the vote, and thinking of democracy as a complete design principle in its most literal sense, where you give as much power to as many people as possible. And I think that that's something that many cities have really struggled to do. Even often, wherever I go, people will say, you know, we try to work with citizens, but it's so hard. The skills aren't there, the time isn't there, we can't get them to come, you hear all the same sorts of things. So the work that I've been really involved in is how do you absolutely bring that piece of work about citizens being at the heart of making their places in every layer of the stack of building cities. I'm not going to talk about every layer of the stack today, thank God, but I do think there's lots and lots of parts around governance, ownership, all sorts that I could go into, but today I'm going to give you some key examples. So I come with 2 hats on today as a director of 00, who are an architecture practice gone rogue. We have geographers, urbanists, architects, people like me who've had a range of different things that they've done in the past, artists, and we've done a range of things from building buildings to spinning out a range of projects such as Open Desk, Impact Hubs, which I was part of building one, WikiHouse, Dark Matter Labs, which is all about the dark matter of creating inclusive cities, which I will talk a little bit about some of this throughout the presentation. And I'm also one of the co-founders of Impact Hub Birmingham. Originally, this was actually going to be my talk, but I realized that probably the details of this you can see in lots and lots of different ways. But what's really, really important here, and I just want to tell you about this, is that 7 years ago, we set up the Impact Hub in Birmingham really as a counter movement. It was not a big, collaborative, lovely local government, citizens, private sector. We all came together and built this beautiful collaborative space and mission. It wasn't. It was a full-blown counter-movement to a patriarchal local government who were not interested in working with citizens, who had made catastrophic decisions, and who did not represent the extremely diverse and population of Birmingham. It was a counter-movement. And hopefully most of my presentation is about how you don't get lots of counter-movements like the one I built. We're now a bit more friendly, right? But my point is you can do this without this having to happen. And you can do it without citizens like me having to put their whole life on the line to build social movements in their city for justice and equity. We couldn't get any support to set this up. We crowdfunded it. It was the biggest social civic crowdfunder in Birmingham that's ever happened. It happened with thousands of people. It was all about creating a more fair, more socially just and equal city. And we do loads of pretty cool stuff there now. But I don't want you to have tons of counter movements like the one we created. I do want you to have lots of empowered citizens who crowdfund hundreds of thousands of euros to make the places that they want to see, but I don't want you to have them do it out of absolute desperation and anger. So now the Impact Hub, which this is all I'm going to talk about, the rest you can find we're all over the internet because we kind of love it a little bit. But the Impact Hub is about this. It's the home of Mission Birmingham, which is a movement for a fairer, more equal and just Birmingham. We work in 3 key strands around creative resistance, which is the role of artists in cities, radical childcare, which is all about radically improving outcomes for children and families, and Demo Dev, which is about putting citizens at the heart of democratic development. And we have some major, major issues in Birmingham. We've got 2 wards that have the highest levels of child poverty in the whole of Europe. We have some of the largest unemployment rates in the whole of the UK. We have some of the most deprived wards in the entirety of Europe, as well as some cool stuff. But what you will only see, really, is the tall buildings and the construction and that story. And what you will only really see is a kind of still very patriarchal central government, local government, that has got a bit better now since we've had the combined authority, but you will not see the city represented in the story that's being painted abroad. We have largely gone with an inward investment story, which has its own positives, which we can talk about, but has some huge challenges if you don't mitigate for that. So how do we think about how citizens can be more involved in actually making their cities more democratic, more fair, the kind of places they will love to be, feel at home and feel proud of? And how do we make sure that happens for the most marginalised, the most hard to reach, the people that we say are hard to reach? They're not hard to reach, they're systematically erased. They are not hard to reach. Communities are not hard to reach. They're living their best lives wherever they are. They're making the best of what they want to be doing in whatever situation around the world. If you call a community hard to reach, it just means the structures you have created are making it hard for them to access central power, whatever that looks like, wherever it is. So when you're using those types of languages, look into yourself and your organisations and your institutions to say, hold on, actually, they're not hard to reach. We know exactly where they are. And where they are, they're being resourceful and doing incredible things. Why is it that we, whoever we is finding it hard to have them as part of what is their place, their home? In an inward investment story, every billion that you take in, it's the citizens that are paying back 1.2, 1.5 billion. They should have a damn straight involvement in what's happening with that money. There shouldn't be an afterthought, but actually, unfortunately, most places I go, including the city of my own, which I love, the same things keep getting said. It's too hard. We've tried, we tried to do it, but there isn't enough time, and we've done a consultation, and I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in how you actually radically shift power and what that looks like. So I'm just going to give you a couple of examples, and they're not all burn everything down examples, okay? I might have started quite strong, but I'm a little bit of a revolutionary, but I'm not hoping anybody comes and sets fire to the centre of Cork or anything like that, okay? So just so we're really clear, so example number 1, Knoll West Media. These are all projects that I've been involved in through some of the different projects we do. So don't worry about trying to match up the ecosystem, okay? The best thing about everything that I'm going to tell you is you can't put one logo on who created all this. So lesson number 1, distributed innovation is really, really important. So Knoll West Media. Okay, so Knoll West Media is in Bristol. It's a centre that's been open, an art centre that's been open for 20 years. It opened up in Knoll West, the most deprived ward in Bristol. Every social challenge you can imagine. Opened up 20 years ago, they've been doing some pretty cool stuff there ever since, at the heart of where deep social deprivation and marginalised communities, and I only use that language because it's easy to understand. I would never go to Knoll West and say, hey, you're a marginalised community. So we worked with them a couple of years ago through one of our projects, Open Desk, which I'll tell you about shortly. So Bristol City Council came to 00. We love your architecture, we love what you do, everything's so cool, it's so funky, can you come and fit out our new office? We have a £100,000 budget, can you come and do the fit out? We were like, yeah, we can. But most of the time we try and think about what the client is actually asking and what we really think would be a good thing to do. So we were like, actually, if you can give us the £100,000, we will set up a pop-up factory within Knoll West. We will upskill young people in the area with modern making techniques, CNC, laser cutting, all sorts of other things. And we will make the furniture, we'll fit out your office, we'll leave a sustainable business in Knoll West, and we'll probably come in under £100,000. We did come in under 100,000, I think about 94,000. Over 6 months, we set up a pop-up factory in the top left-hand corner. You can see a picture, which is just a room in a community centre in the middle of Knoll West. We upskilled and trained up a number of unemployed young people and residents in Knoll West. They got used to modern making techniques, they learned new skills, and they set up this pop-up called Eagle House. And some of on the bottom right, you can start to see some of the quality. So when people tell you about the small C of community, like the community can do that bit, and they give you like a wall that you can paint or something, because that's about all that people think the community will be able to do. Actually, the quality of the fit out, this was some of the furniture. And this was some of the final fit out at Bristol City Council. Now that, if you were to compare it to a bunch of other open desk office fit outs, people pay hundreds of thousands for, you know, the funky furniture. That was made by young people in Knoll West. That business now runs in Bristol, one site in Knoll West and one in the city centre, employs tons of people. I think about 12 in one site and 15 in the other, managed by two people from the estate. And you know, is manufacturing and making and cutting furniture for people all over Bristol. And about 2 years ago, these were the people that Stats said were the hard-to-reach, most marginalised communities. That's a tiny little example. So that leads me nicely onto an example of Open Desk. So when I talk about democratising design, here's an example. About 15 years ago, when the Impact Hub Network first started, we were asked to come and do some furniture for some of the impact hubs. We started to design one desk, and we started to get a lot of attention from the design of that desk, and people all over the world started to say, hey, can we order that? Can we have one of those? And so we started to think about what the supply chain of that would look like. Obviously, it became rapidly ridiculous. You're not going to be making a desk and sending it across the world to China or whatever. Even though that is actually what we do with furniture supply chains, but we weren't going to be doing that. So what we did was we started up an online platform at that time where people from all over the world, designers, could upload their designs onto the net. People could download them, send it off to a CNC workshop like the one you heard about in Knoll West, cut out the pieces, carry it down the road, put it together in their office. We thought it might be successful. You know, a few people would start doing it in the Impact Hub network. Actually, this is where we're currently at. It's had more than 100,000 downloads across the world. And people are, every day we're getting new designers, new makers. Some people are experimenting in their own back garden, but people are actually using it as a legitimate way to get fit out. So they'll pick all their designs, send it to the local maker, ask the local maker to come and build those things in their offices. Now, some of it is lovely and nice that we've got great furniture. You go on there's loads of cool stuff. But these were part of our first experiments about how you actually democratise the means to get shit done. So in places like Birmingham, the corner of Birmingham, somebody could set up a workshop like this, like we did in Knoll West, and actually start to think about how they can create and make and do all of those sorts of things. So yesterday I went to Bench Space, which was amazing to go to in the old Ford factory. And the story of the founder there was pretty similar to us. You know, he saw a gap, nobody really was supporting him, so he thought, you know what, we're going to go do it ourselves. Those are the sort of examples we need to stop happening on the fringes, and we need to be investing in. We need to invest in dramatically unlocking this capacity. Instead of thinking it's like a nice little side thing, you need to trust that when you invest in your citizens, you're actually going to get a better city, and you're not going to get burnt down, right? Because that's obviously the worry. The worry is like, if people get too much power, then what happens to us? Yeah, that won't happen. Another example. I was involved in this a few years ago, but it's now grown into a big £10 million project in Barking and Dagenham, and this is called Participatory City. Some of them I've just given you a quick slide so you can go and look it up. This is Barking and Dagenham, one of the boroughs of London. there's lots of people here from London who could probably tell you more, that has significant social challenges. The council invested in this project to basically do what we just said, dramatically upskill and work with residents of Barking and Dagenham to set up their own projects, create their own spaces, and to really, really reimagine how citizens could help develop and grow the place. Same in Food Lab Detroit. This is Davita. She's an absolute legend. I don't know how my time's gone so quick because it's the coffee. Oh, okay, the clock's going really the wrong time. But anyway, okay, right. Okay. Right, okay. So Food Lab Detroit is basically all about actually many communities of colour in Detroit are really struggling after the whole city collapsed, and many communities of colour are often the ones that struggle most when things like that happen. And Davita is using food and food incubation and growing and incubating food businesses to do that, to create real, incredible, high quality restaurants and food businesses out of the centre, so that Detroit is becoming a really amazing place to go and try and be with entrepreneurs of colour across the city doing incredible things. This isn't, I'm going to have to be much quicker now because the clock on here is telling me a totally different time. So this is a project of ours, Demo Dev. We use data to look at all the sites across the West Midlands Combined Authority area. Brownfield sites currently owned by the City Council, undeveloped. Developers don't want to touch them because they're too risky, there's not enough money to be made. City Council in Birmingham, for example, it's costing them much more than actually to upkeep them than it is to just hold on to them. So we've put together an ambitious plan that you could build about 5,000 homes through modern making technologies on those sites, and they can be built with people, by people, and can help to deal with the skills shortage and many other things. So to test it out, we thought we'd try it on one of our co-founders' houses. This is Andy on the bottom left, drinking his tea. So this was his house before. We thought, let's see how far we can actually get before we have to get any professionals in. Andy's dad's a builder, so we got a bit of advice. And this is what we created. 4 weeks, we managed to create a fully waterproof, incredible extension that cost £9,000 all in. Including all his nice furniture and paint and everything, and was built solely by people from the hub who wanted to go and see what that was like. That's an example of that sort of making techniques. This is just a quick video. This is WikiHouse. This is technology we used. Up and down the country. Should press play. Is it playing the video? Yeah. Oh, yeah. So up and down the country, we've been testing a lot of this technology out. How much do you need professional builders? How much do you need? How much can citizens do? And actually, can you create pop-up factories in every neighbourhood so that in every development, 500 or 1,000 of the homes, or 50 or 5, if you're not feeling too ambitious, can actually be made by people. When things are made by people, they look after them better. They make sure that they actually are building what they want. And the great thing about these sorts of modular technologies is actually you can keep extending them as your family or life grows or changes. So this is just a really simple example. And because my time's nearly up, I'm going to move on. This took 4 weeks. This is a farmhouse in Warwickshire. And we're now starting to really see this sort of technology meaning something significant. So that's another example of what we do. And so the aim in the sort of making and doing part of this story is about how do we get to that beautiful grey space in the middle where you've got a few big and you've got many, many small, and you're not in the situation that we're in where 6 house builders are building the whole of UK's housing. So that little space in the middle is where you want to get. We're not saying give citizens the whole development plan for the whole of Cork, and we're also not saying give it to a couple of housing providers. So, in conclusion, there are many examples and projects and ideas. We have no shortage of how to make it happen. You just have to start implementing it. You have to trust that when you invest in and work with citizens, that things will be better. There's hundreds of examples. There's also hundreds of examples of what happens when you don't. Dr. David R. Williams talks about the impact of racism on people's health in the US. Communities of colour live on average 10 years shorter due to the micro microaggressions and constant small examples of how their lives are different to their counterparts in the US, and that takes on average 10 years off their lives. You can do this with poverty, you can do this with inequality. The evidence is all there of what happens when you don't work with citizens. Currently, citizens are treated by our economy as overheads, and we need to find a way that gets to humans being the source of creative value. So, to finish this last little bit, this isn't the only way. Lots of small projects are not the only way. You're going to have to radically redesign governance, ownership, how you invest in citizens, where you start the work, how deeply and ambitiously you go into neighbourhoods. There's tons of things that are going to have to happen that aren't just about the projects, but the projects are a good way to start building agency. So maybe Cork could be the one that really actually skips all the challenges that we've got and looks at a lot of this, the impact of incarceration, the future of bike-first, walking-first cities, community land trusts in all the developments that you're doing to make sure you're not just preparing for the next 40 years, but 100 years later, communities are still able to actually harness the value of their land. Maybe air quality will be the best in the world in Cork. So a city rising is a beautiful thing, but only actually if it's with the people who are here and they are at the core of making it happen.